In this episode of Rich in Relationship, how unclear roles are breaking your marriage and maybe your business. Every couple I work with thinks they're being flexible, and flexibility is a good thing, especially when you've got a lot of spinning plates, you're juggling a lot of balls, whether it's kids, work, or both. We just jump in where needed, they say, or we both wear a lot of hats. We don't need rigid roles. We just get it done. Just do it is what the culture teaches us. And in the beginning, that works, right? In the beginning, you're both excited, you're engaged, you're picking up those threads, you're moving things forward. It feels efficient. It feels collaborative. It feels like you're on the same team. But over time, that flexibility starts to blur. And felt like teamwork in the beginning starts to turn into friction. No one is fully clear on who owns what. Not really. So things get done, but not everything. And not everything gets done clearly or well. Why is that? When does that happen, particularly at transitions? Responsibilities start to overlap in transitions because when there's a transition, when there's a change in the family system, a change in the business, it demands something new, but you're used to stepping in to a frame that no longer is. And so your responsibilities start to overlap. Your decisions stall, and small frustrations start showing up in places that you don't want them to, that they shouldn't. Maybe in the bedroom, maybe in the kitchen, definitely at work. On the surface, it looks like normal pressure. If you're working together, it just seems like normal business pressure. It just seems like we're grinding, right? Comes a time in life where you have to grind. But what starts happening is you're grinding all the time. There's deadlines that you gotta grind for. There's execution. You gotta grind for the follow through. You're not liking it like you did when you were flexible. When you were flexible, you were jumping in and doing things you enjoyed. Now, it's things that maybe you do okay, but you don't really love, and it feels like a grind. And underneath it, something else is happening. You're operating inside of a system that you both made up, but was never clearly defined. And even worse, once it had its own rhythm and definition, the game started changing. And when the game changes, and you're not ready, that changes everything, because now every task becomes a question. Well, maybe not every task. There's things you still like doing, things you still love doing, but there's tasks that neither of you love. Like at home, it might be no one loves emptying the dishwasher. That's a big one here. At work, it might be no one really wants to keep the books up to date. I hear this from a lot of CPAs and accountants, that people who are in partnerships together at work and at home often neglect their books. It's the things that are important but not urgent, and nobody really enjoys them. Or maybe you love doing the books. Maybe it's managing your VA or your workers, and nobody really loves HR. There's always something that the two partners, neither of them really loves, and that's where the problems start. It becomes a question. It becomes a negotiation who's going to handle it. Or somebody handles it and they don't handle it really well because they're not juiced about it, and you get criticized for it. Hey, I did what I thought I was supposed to be doing. Why are you railing on me? Every mistake becomes personal. Let me make this real. I worked with a couple recently who worked together and lived together. Their business was growing, revenue was solid, but everything felt heavier than it should. It was the growth that drove it there, that change. Because with growth, you have to adapt. But they had slipped into a rhythm that was comfortable for them both, and they weren't ready to adapt. They were both involved in operations. They were both talking to clients. They were both managing delivery. They were both stepping in wherever something needed to get done. And then a client issue came up. Nothing major, but it wasn't handled cleanly because neither of them really wanted to do it. And immediately the tension hit. I thought you were taking that. No, I thought you had it. Well, you spoke to them last, but you usually handle follow-ups. Now, they weren't talking about the client anymore. They were negotiating ownership of that job. And the truth is that neither of them really loved client relationships to begin with. So naturally, this is the area where the friction came up. They were negotiating ownership in real time, under pressure, with frustration already in the room. And I've seen this pattern play out again and again. I've seen it play out with couples who don't work together. The kids are getting ready to go to college, and they're faced with the possibility of an empty nest, and they realize that everything needs to change, and the way they were doing things isn't going to work as they move forward, and things start slipping between the cracks. Whether it's at home or at business, whenever there's growth or a major transition, the same breakdown happens because there wasn't a clear understanding of roles in the first place. It looks like a communication issue. It feels like a workload issue. If we just work harder, if we just grind it out, it's gonna be a little better. But it isn't. It's a gap. It's a gap in how the partnership is structured. It's a gap in who's responsible, fully responsible for what. And those gaps don't show up when things are smooth. They show up under pressure. And pressure happens when there's change or transition, positive or negative. You know, we have a saying at Rich in Relationship, and that is that when a major change happens in a relationship, that's when you find out what's working and what ain't. These things show up under pressure, and that is the work that I do. I help partners see where their system is breaking and fix it at that level. It's not that the relationship is breaking, it's the system that they're managing the relationship with. Because if structure isn't clear, everything else gets distorted. It feels personal. You start bringing in your history and it gets very colorful, if you know what I mean. One person steps in to help and it feels like control to the other. The other pulls back, trying to get a little safety, and it feels like disengagement, maybe even stonewalling. No one is trying to create a problem, but the system they're operating in makes the problem inevitable. I have lived this myself. There was a period where things in my own relationship started to feel slightly off, nothing dramatic, just that low-level friction. Conversations taking longer than they should, decisions not feeling clean, maybe not even being made together. There was this subtle sense of, why is this harder than it needs to be? And when I really looked at it, it wasn't effort, because we were both doing it. We were grinding. It wasn't intention, because we both had really good intentions. It was that we lacked clarity, not only about the decision, but about what strengths each of us was going to bring to that decision, and what strengths we were lacking and maybe need to lean into somebody else for. So we were stepping in for each other and pulling back in the wrong places and quietly getting frustrated about it. One would step in to help and it wouldn't be the right kind of help, and the other would get frustrated, or one would pull back thinking they were allowing the other to take the lead, and there'd be frustration. And that's how this shows up. This is where it really starts to cost you, not operationally at first, emotionally. It costs you operationally too, but the emotional cost is what really does the damage. Frustration, it expands into resentment. Important distinction. A resentment is a compounded frustration or anger. It's something that's festered and stewed. It's like orange juice that's been in the fridge too long, has gotten kind of acid tasting instead of sweet. And it doesn't show up as resentment right away. It sounds like, I guess I'll just take care of that, or forget it, I'll do it myself. Why do I have to be the one catching everything? It just starts out as attitudes and remarks, or maybe it's like, oh, okay, you handle it, thinking they'll blow it. And then you know they'll blow it because it's not what they're good at. They won't blow it completely, but just enough. And then when they blow it, bam, I told you. You know, that self-righteous resentment and anger kicks in. One of you starts to feel overextended, like you're carrying more than your share, and no one really sees it. The other starts to feel unappreciated, like no matter what you do, it's not quite right. And now every small issue has weight behind it. Tone changes, patience shortens, conversations tighten, and suddenly those problems, those business problems, those problems at home, they don't feel like they're just about function anymore. They feel personal. You feel criticized. You feel attacked. You feel undersupported. You feel like you're not being heard. You feel like you're not understood. And that's when couples start saying, we're both working all the time, we're grinding, but it feels messy. That's not a workload problem. That's a system problem. Sometimes we work harder when we need to work smarter. And here's what actually fixes it. Not more communication, because there's been plenty of that, let's be honest. Not more effort, because you're busting your butts, self-sacrificing, giving up gym time, giving up kid time, giving up time together to grind it out. It's clarity. Clarity on what's actually happening. Clarity on what your strengths are. Clarity on what the situation needs. Clarity on who has the strengths to meet the needs of the situation. And then defining ownership. It might be that one of you owns it, but realizes they don't have the strengths and brings somebody else in, but they own it. Instead of being a hat that you pass back and forth to each other. I don't want it. More like a hot potato. I don't want it. You take it. I don't want it. You take it. I'm taking it. Stop Stop taking it from me. Instead of playing hot potato and getting frustrated over it, define ownership and responsibility, because we can't learn if we don't fully own, and we drop the potato, we learn from it. But when we don't fully own it and it gets dropped, we blame the other person. Let me show you what that looks like. In the same couple, we stopped talking about helping and started defining the challenge. And through defining the solution, we got clear on who was best suited to be responsible for it based on innate abilities, skills, talents, previous experience, time, available time. Sometimes the one who has the most experience does not have the time. One of them owned client communication fully and completely. And honestly, since neither of them was really good at it, they brought in somebody else to help with this. That means that that person is responsible for the outcome. That the person they hired, the person who owns it, is responsible for the outcome. They're responsible for the person that they're delegating to. They're responsible for making sure they delegate clearly. They're responsible for making sure that the person understands the clear delegation. They're responsible for holding that person accountable, and they're responsible for helping that person to succeed when they inevitably drop the ball, because we're freaking human beings. We drop the ball, and that's how we learn. They handle the follow-ups, they close the loops, they're accountable for the client experience. Accountability is the key here. And the other partner does not step in unless asked. No matter how much they think the person responsible is messing it up or not, they stay out of it. We allow one another to learn and grow, and when one of us asks for help, then we step in as a helper, not as a fixer. We're not fixing, we're supporting. Now, on the other side in this situation, the other partner took on fully delivery or operations, if you really want to use the technical term. They made sure that timelines were met. They made sure that execution happened. They made sure that quality was present as they executed within the timelines. So one partner has got client relations, the other had operations. And now, if something slips between the cracks or goes wrong for some reason or doesn't go as well as expected, it's no longer, who had this? I thought you had this. No, I thought you had this. It's, all right, what happened? How can I help you? How do we fix it? It's clean, it's direct, it is solvable. And that's what structure does. It removes the emotional charge because you're working in solutions instead of accusing each other of being the problem. It removes the ambiguity. You don't need more communication, you need focused, clear communication. You need a system that drives that actually works. One person owns each hat for each area, not two. You decide, once you own that hat, where's your autonomy? Where do you need alignment? And it's not that one person makes all the decisions in that area, right? You both need to be in agreement about how that area supports your shared vision. So when you wear a hat for an area, whether it's emptying the dishwasher or client management, you understand what the expectation is of everyone involved. That's part of the system. Not only do you know who owns what, but you are in alignment. You know when to make an autonomous decision. You don't have to go to your partner. If you're emptying the dishwasher, you don't have to say, do I take the silverware out first or do I take the cups out first? You do it in the order that you know works best based on the mission, vision, and values that you've shared together. And if the other partner thinks you're doing it wrong, then you get to experiment and see what the best way is. That's true for business and the dishwasher. There is always a best way. And the way to find the best way is to experiment and measure. So if your partner is wearing the hat and you disagree with the way they're doing something and you think you have a better way, you don't just say, my way is best. You test it out. That's how you run a structured business. You stop overlaps when you do that. You stop frustration and resentment and you go into the mode of building together. The tension that you're feeling right now, it isn't coming from not doing enough. It isn't coming from not grinding like you should. It isn't coming from sacrificing. I am so sick of this ethos of I have to sacrifice to succeed. We need to work smarter, not harder. Not that we don't need to work hard, but there comes a time when we need to think things through. Unclear roles don't slow your life down, your business down. They quietly erode your relationship. So if things feel heavier than they should, get clear. Hey, if this is resonating with you, share this with your friends. Subscribe to this channel. Help us build a movement of people who are working smarter, not just harder. I'm Rich Heller at Rich in Relationship. Have an amazing day and a fantastic tomorrow.